An Ideal Family by Katherine Mansfield. That evening, for the first time in his life, as he pressed through the swing door and ascended the 3 broad steps to the pavement, old Mr. Neve felt he was too old for the spring. Spring, warm, eager, restless, was there, waiting for him in the golden light, ready in front of everybody to run up, to blow in his white beard, to drag sweetly on his arm. And he couldn't meet her. No, he couldn't square up once more and stride off, jaunty as a young man. He was tired, and, although the late sun was still shining, curiously cold, with a numbed feeling all over. Quite suddenly he hadn't the energy, he hadn't the heart to stand this gaiety and bright movement any longer. It confused him. He wanted to stand still, to wave it away with his stick, to say, "Be off with you." Suddenly it was a terrible effort to greet as usual, tipping his wide awake with his stick, all the people whom he knew, the friends, acquaintances, shopkeepers, postmen, drivers. But the gay glance that went with the gesture, the kindly twinkle that seemed to say, "I'm a match and more for any of you," that old Mr. Neve could not manage at all. He stumped along, lifting his knees high as if he were walking through air that had somehow grown heavy and solid like water. And the homeward-looking crowd hurried by, the trams clanked, the light carts clattered, the big swinging cabs bowled along with that reckless defiant indifference that one knows only in dreams. It had been a day like other days at the office. Nothing special had happened. Harold hadn't come back from lunch until close on 4. Where had he been? What had he been up to? He wasn't going to let his father know. Old Mr. Neve happened to be in the vestibule, saying good-bye to a caller, when Harold sauntered in, perfectly turned out as usual, cool, suave, smiling that peculiar little half-smile that woman found so fascinating. Ah, Harold was too handsome by far. That had been the trouble all along. No man had a right to such eyes, such lashes, and such lips. It was uncanny. As for his mother, his sisters, and the servants, it was not too much to say they made a young god of him. They worshipped Harold, they forgave him everything, and he needed some forgiving ever since the time when he was 13 and he had stolen his mother's purse, taken the money, and hidden the purse in the cook's bedroom. Old Mr. Neve struck sharply with his stick upon the pavement edge. But it wasn't only his family who spoiled Harold, he reflected. It was everybody. He had only to look and to smile, and down they went before him. So perhaps it wasn't to be wondered at that he expected the office to carry on the tradition. But it couldn't be done. No business, not even a successful, established, big-paying concern, could be played with. A man had either to put his whole heart and soul into it, or it went all to pieces before his eyes. And then Charlotte and the girls were always at him to make the whole thing over to Harold, to retire, and to spend his time enjoying himself. Enjoying himself! Old Mr. Neve stopped dead under a group of ancient cabbage palms outside the government buildings. Enjoying himself? The wind of evening shook the dark leaves to a thin, airy cackle. Sitting at home, twiddling his thumbs, conscious all the while that his life's work was slipping away, dissolving, disappearing through Harold's fine fingers, while Harold smiled. "Why will you be so unreasonable, father? There's absolutely no need for you to go to the office. It only makes it very awkward for us when people persist in saying how tired you're looking. Here's this huge house and garden. Surely you could be happy in appreciating it for a change. Or you could take up some hobby." And Lola the baby had chimed in loftily. "All men ought to have hobbies. It makes life impossible if they haven't." Well, he couldn't help a grim smile as painfully he began to climb the hill that led into Harcourt Avenue. Where would Lola and his sisters and Charlotte be if he had gone in for hobbies, he'd like to know? Hobbies couldn't pay for the townhouse and the seaside bungalow, and their horses and their golf, and the 60-guinea gramophone in the music room for them to dance to. Not that he grudged them these things. No, they were smart, good-looking girls, and Charlotte was a remarkable woman. It was natural for them to be in the swim. As a matter of fact, no other house in the town was as popular as theirs. No other family entertained so much. And how many times old Mr. Neve, pushing the cigar box across the smoking room table, had listened to praises of his wife, his girls, of himself even. "You're an ideal family, sir, an ideal family. It's like something one reads about or sees on the stage." "That's all right, my boy," old Mr. Neve would reply. "Try one of those. I think you'll like them. And if you care to smoke in the garden, you'll find the girls on the lawn, I dare say." That was why the girls had never married, so people said. They could have married anybody, but they had too good a time at home. They were too happy together, the girls and Charlotte. Well, well, perhaps so. By this time he had walked the length of fashionable Harcourt Avenue. He had reached the corner house, their house. The carriage gates were pushed back. There were fresh marks of wheels on the drive. And then he faced the big white painted house with its wide open windows, its tulle curtains floating outwards, its blue jars of hyacinth on the broad sills. On either side of the carriage porch, their hydrangeas, famous in the town, were coming into flower. The pinkish-bluish masses of flower lay like light among the spreading leaves. And somehow it seemed to old Mr. Neve that the house and the flowers, and even the fresh marks on the drive, were saying, "There is young life here, there are girls." The hall, as always, was dusky with wraps, parasols, gloves, piled on the oak chests. From the music room sounded the piano, quick, loud, and impatient. Through the drawing-room door, that was ajar, voices floated. "And were there ices?" came from Charlotte. Then the creak of her rocker. "Ices!" cried Ethel. "My dear mother, you never saw such ices. Only two kinds. And one a common little strawberry shop ice, in a sopping wet frill." "The food altogether was too appalling," came from Marion. "Still, it's rather early for ices," said Charlotte easily. "But why, if one has them at all—" began Ethel. "Oh, quite so, darling," crooned Charlotte. Suddenly the music-room door opened and Lola dashed out. She started, she nearly screamed, at the sight of old Mr. Neve. "Gracious, father, what a fright you gave me! Have you just come home? Why isn't Charles here to help you off with your coat?" Her cheeks were crimson from playing, her eyes glittered, the hair fell over her forehead, and she breathed as though she had come running through the dark and was frightened. Old Mr. Neve stared at his youngest daughter. He felt he had never seen her before. So that was Lola, was it? But she seemed to have forgotten her father. It was not for him that she was waiting there. Now she put the tip of her crumpled handkerchief between her teeth and tugged at it angrily. The telephone rang. "Ah!" Lola gave a cry like a sob and dashed past him. The door of the telephone room slammed, and at the same moment Charlotte called, "Is that you, father?" "You're tired again," said Charlotte reproachfully, and she stopped the rocker and offered her warm plum-like cheek. Bright-haired Ethel pecked his beard. Marion's lips brushed his ear. "Did you walk back, father?" asked Charlotte. "Yes, I walked home," said old Mr. Neve, and he sank into one of the immense drawing-room chairs. "But why didn't you take a cab?" said Ethel. "There are hundreds of cabs about at that time." "My dear Ethel," cried Marion, "if father prefers to tire himself out, I really don't see what business of ours it is to interfere." "Children, children," coaxed Charlotte. But Marion wouldn't be stopped. "No, mother, you spoil father, and it's not right. You ought to be stricter with him. He's very naughty." She laughed a hard, bright laugh and patted her hair in a mirror. Strange. When she was a little girl, she had such a soft, hesitating voice. She had even stuttered, and now, whatever she said, even if it was only, "Jam, please, father," it rang out as though she were on the stage. "Did Harold leave the office before you, dear?" asked Charlotte, beginning to rock again. "I'm not sure," said old Mr. Neve. "I'm not sure. I didn't see him after 4 o'clock. He said—" began Charlotte. But at that moment Ethel, who was twitching over the leaves of some paper or other, ran to her mother and sank down beside her chair. "There, you see," she cried. "That's what I mean, Mummy. Yellow with touches of silver. Don't you agree?" "Give it to me, love," said Charlotte. She fumbled for her tortoise-shell spectacles and put them on. gave the page a little dab with her plump small fingers, and pursed up her lips. "Very sweet," she crooned vaguely. She looked at Ethel over her spectacles. "But I shouldn't have the train." "Not the train," wailed Ethel tragically. "But the train's the whole point." "Here, Mother, let me decide." Marion snatched the paper playfully from Charlotte. "I agree with Mother," she cried triumphantly. "The train outweighs it." Old Mr. Neave, forgotten, sank into the broad lap of his chair, and dozing, heard them as though he dreamed. There was no doubt about it. He was tired out. He had lost his hold. Even Charlotte and the girls were too much for him tonight. They were too... But all his drowsing brain could think of was too rich for him. And somewhere, at the back of everything, he was watching a little withered ancient man climbing up endless flights of stairs. Who was he? "I shan't dress tonight," he muttered. "What do you say, Father?" What? Old Mr. Neave woke with a start and stared across at them. "I shan't dress tonight," he repeated. "But, Father, we've got Lucille coming, and Henry Davenport, and Mrs. Teddie Walker. It will look so very out of the picture. Don't you feel well, dear? You needn't make any effort. What is Charles for?" "But if you're really not up to it," Charlotte wavered. Very well, very well." Old Mr. Neave got up and went to join that little old climbing fellow just as far as his dressing room. There young Charles was waiting for him. Carefully, as though everything depended on it, he was tucking a towel round the hot water can. Young Charles had been a favourite of his ever since, as a little red-faced boy, he had come into the house to look after the fires. Old Mr. Neave lowered himself into the cane lounge by the window, stretched out his legs, and made his little evening joke. "Dress him up, Charles." And Charles, breathing intensely and frowning, bent forward to take the pin out of his tie. Well. It was pleasant by the open window, very pleasant, a fine mild evening. They were cutting the grass on the tennis court below. He heard the soft chirr of the mower. Soon the girls would begin their tennis parties again. And at the thought, he seemed to hear Marion's voice ring out, "Good for you, partner. Oh, play, partner. Oh, very nice indeed." Then Charlotte calling from the veranda, "Where is Harold?" And Ethel, "He's certainly not here, Mother." And Charlotte's vague, "He said—" Old Mr. Neave sighed, got up, and putting one hand under his beard, he took the comb from young Charles and carefully combed the white beard over. Charles gave him a folded handkerchief, his watch and seals, and spectacle case. "That will do, my lad." The door shut, he sank back. He was alone. And now that little ancient fellow was climbing down endless flights that led to a glittering gay dining room. What legs he had! They were like a spider's, thin, withered. "You're an ideal family, sir, an ideal family." But if that were true, why didn't Charlotte or the girls stop him? Why was he all alone, climbing up and down? Where was Harold? It was no good expecting anything from Harold. Down, down went the little old spider, and then to his horror, old Mr. Neave saw him slip past the dining room and make for the porch, the dark drive, the carriage gates, the office. "Stop him! Stop him, somebody!" Old Mr. Neave started up. It was dark in his dressing room. The window shone pale. How long had he been asleep? He listened, and through the big, airy, darkened house there floated far-away voices, far-away sounds. Perhaps, he thought vaguely, he had been asleep for a long time. He'd been forgotten. What had all this to do with him? This house and Charlotte, the girls, and Harold? What did he know about them? They were strangers to him. Life had passed him by. Charlotte was not his wife. His wife! A dark porch, half hidden by a passion vine that drooped sorrowful, mournful, as though it understood. Small, warm arms were round his neck. A face, little and pale, lifted to his, and a voice breathed, "Goodbye, my treasure." My treasure! Goodbye, my treasure! Which of them had spoken? Why had they said goodbye? There had been some terrible mistake. She was his wife, that little pale girl, and all the rest of his life had been a dream. Then the door opened, and young Charles, standing in the light, put his hands by his side and shouted like a young soldier, "Dinner is on the table, sir." I'm coming, said old Mr. Neave. End of An Ideal Family. Recording by Ross Clement.
But now it's time for Jessica's Gems. you didn't particularly like the story. It wasn't your kind of story, was it?
No, really. The story was not so. But I didn't like it really. I didn't like this story, especially the attitude of this man, because it was if in the first part in the first paragraph. The mood of this man seems to be a miserable man. Even he's a healthy man, wealthy man.
Wealthy, yeah.
Wealthy.
Well, I don't know whether he's healthy. I mean, he's quite elderly, isn't he? He's quite old.
He's quite elderly, but not so much. I mean, I don't think that he has some disease or something like that. So, in my opinion, it's the attitude, because he was thinking about how his son behaved. I mean, Harold, because he is good looking, but he is not so involved in his job, and so he really.
We had a pre-chat, didn't we? We had a chat about this, and somehow this Mr. Neve, that's his name, Mr. Neve, he sort of annoyed you a bit. He annoyed you. You didn't really have any sympathy for him, did you?
No.
Why was it? You did tell me why. Why did he annoy you a bit? His character.
No, I didn't really. I didn't like the attitude. I mean, it's getting older, like a lot of people. I think he is healthy, as I told you. He is full of money, so wealthy too. And even he's in this, fantastic condition. He's always, there is something wrong in his life. It seems like there is always something wrong in his life, because he's not happy about his family. Even the title is An Ideal Family. It's not ideal.
Yeah, that's being kind of ironic, isn't it? Because it's not an ideal family, is it? Because he feels very separated. He feels very alien, and he feels like they don't understand him, and they're almost like strangers to him. Because he's been into this company, building this company all his life, and he's given the family lots of money. They've got a massive house, they've got swimming pools, tennis courts, and all the things that money can buy, but he hasn't really got much of a connection with them, has he? You were kind of veering towards it's his fault.
Yes, it is completely. Because if I understand well, he spent all his life at work.
Yeah.
He didn't care about his family. I mean, only in the economical way, but he didn't spend time with them. And so now, at the end of his life, I don't know if he's really at the end of his life, but working life. So now he's blaming the others, but he has to blame himself, not his family.
With Jessica's Gems, we pull out some of the language used in the story. And you've pulled out a few gems, Jessica, because I've looked, I've got them in front of me, what you wrote. So the first thing that you've pulled out, you've put, and you've put a quote from the story. It says, "I shan't dress tonight," he muttered. Okay, and then you came up with a question, and it was comparing the difference between will and shall.
Yeah, it is.
And that's an interesting question, I think.
Yeah, because really, I would like to know, how often do you use shall compared to will? How often? All
right. Well, I mean, have you got any idea? Have you looked into it? Because they're definitely not the same thing.
Yeah, if you want, I tell you what I know.
Tell me what you know, really, and then I'll see if I can.
Yes, about shall. Of course, we use when we have the first person singular, the first plural. No, we. I and we.
I and we, and do you know what? That's really important, because we don't say you shall.
Yeah.
We only use it in I shall, we shall, or shall we, shall I. We don't say shall you as a question, or so we only use it with those two: first person singular, first person plural. So that's something really important to know about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
And the second thing I know, when I use a shall, I use when I have to suggest something to someone. For example, shall we go out, or shall we go to the theater, something like that. So I prefer using shall than will. And I don't know if I'm
no, you're absolutely correct
or not.
You're absolutely correct, because will and shall are not the same thing. They are not the same thing, from my understanding. If you said, like, so you take, shall we go to the cinema tonight? To use shall, you're suggesting something. You're suggesting an idea, and you're posing a question. If you said, will we go to the cinema tonight? That doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound right. So you'd have to use something else. Will we go to the cinema tonight? It's understandable, but it doesn't sound correct to my ears. I would probably say it in a different, if I wasn't going to use shall, I would say it in a different way.
Yeah.
Are we going to the cinema tonight? That's what I would use. But I wouldn't say, will we go to the cinema tonight?
Or
I would say, are we going? Are we going to the cinema tonight? So it is different.
It's different, yeah.
And there's this element with shall in a suggestion. You're suggesting something, maybe asking something where you're sort of, you're suggesting an idea, and then you want confirmation from the person that you're suggesting the idea to. Yeah, okay. Anything else you got about shall?
Or, for example, if you have to offer something, shall we close the door, or shall we open the window? For example, Absolutely. You are in a situation where it's very hot.
Absolutely. You wouldn't say, will we close the door? Will we? You're right. You're sort of asking someone, or wanting a confirmation from someone. Yeah, absolutely. But you were saying that Americanized English, it's not used. Is that true?
I've read something about it, and they say it's really rare using shall than will. Yeah.
All right, that's interesting. When I use it, let's say we know we're going out, we're leaving the building, and I would just say, shall we?
Shall we?
As in, is it time to go now? Shall we go? So I'll just say, shall we? And then, that's when it's used very often. Shall we? As in, is it the right time now? Shall we go?
Yeah. If I have to summarize, you use a shall when you have to suggest something or offering something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there is a suggestion or an offering.
An offering, yeah.
And that's when we use it. And I say we, it sounds like, Americans don't use it so much. They'll use something.
No, yes, yeah.
And it's
I read it, so.
Yeah, but in British English, it's very often used.
Yeah, it is actually.
And also, and this brings to the next question that you've posed.
Yeah.
Should. Now, often someone would say, should we close the door?
Yeah.
Should we close the door? It's a bit hot. Yeah. So sometimes they would say should.
Should.
Or shall. In some contexts, should and shall are the same. Similar.
It's something, because the next question is...
Yeah, next question.
Question is, which is the difference between should and ought to? Because really, it's something that I don't understand if there is actually a difference or not. So I asking you.
You've posed, I can see on your notes that you've put, for John, do you agree with the first or the second explanation? And then you've put two explanations.
Yeah, because
mark the difference between should and ought to. I don't know whether I should just read out what you've put.
If you want, I can tell you.
Yeah, go on, tell us.
Yeah, because I found that should and ought to, in general, you used to express obligation, suggestion, or advice, and both of them. But there is really some differences in the first explanation that when the obligation, suggestion, and advice, they are correct ethically. I mean, they are connected with some society's point of view.
Okay.
And really, it's very hard to understand when you have to use.
Well,
it.
yeah.
I mean,
we had a chat about this, didn't we?
And really.
And I don't. There is a thing. I mean, in some of the things we look at in the English language, there is a grey area where people have all sorts of theories about what the difference is between two things. Now, in my opinion, should and ought to, in terms of what speakers use, what English natives use, I don't believe there is any difference. I think they're used interchangeably. I really do. I don't see any marked difference between the two. I should visit Nan this weekend because it's her birthday, meaning exactly the same thing. I could say I ought to visit Nan this weekend because it's her birthday. I could, they mean the same thing. In the real world, they mean the same thing. So I don't see any difference.
Yeah, because there is another explanation that I found.
Okay.
Ought to is stronger in meaning than should. But really, I read a lot of examples, but I don't understand this difference. I mean, maybe I can
give you my opinion, Jessica, and in my opinion, there's no strength difference between the two either. I really, really cannot say that ought to is a stronger, message than should. In reality, in the language that I've, been speaking since I was, a baby, a child. In reality, in real terms, it doesn't seem like anyone that's learning English should really worry or stress themselves about is ought to appropriate or is should appropriate and what situation. I honestly think they are the same. They have the same meaning, same feeling, same. All I can probably say is ought to is probably in modern language less common now.
Okay.
I would say it's less common than should.
Okay, I choose should.
Yeah. I mean, you could use should every time in the right context.
Better for me.
And not actually ever use ought to, never worry about it.
Yeah. Okay.
So has that sort of cleared it up? This should and ought to?
It is actually. I'm relieved now. So.
That's
Honestly, yes, because I always say, oh my God, when I have to use this ought to.
Okay, all right. Well, then you can not actually use ought to if you don't want to. Just use should.
Don't worry.
And your language will not be weak
forever. Yes, I will.
All right. Well, that's good that I relieved you of some pain.
Well, and I have another question for you. And it's really, what does my lad mean?
Yeah, I can see. Right, so you've put the question, and you've said, all right, yeah, that you've quoted something from.
Yes, but my lad is actually what I don't know.
Okay, my lad. So I'm presuming an older man would say that to a younger man.
Yeah.
Okay, it would never be the other way round. You would never have a young man saying it to an old man.
Okay.
That would be someone from an older man, normally a man, it could be a woman as well, speaking to a young man. And lad is literally a young man, a lad.
Okay.
But this my lad, so he says it says, that will do, my lad. It's almost like, it's almost an affectionate term.
Oh, okay.
It's almost kind of, we say good lad to a young man that's just helped you do something, lift something. You say, oh, good lad, good lad. It's almost a term, we say term of endearment, which actually means, something that's nice, that's something that's said in an affectionate way about someone. So it's not rude in any way, but it is, you wouldn't say my lad to, for example, a doctor or something. That could be seen as disrespectful because you're seeing him as young, as some. So there, it's one of those terms that you could say probably you wouldn't say to a professional man. You would only say to someone that's probably a teenager, something like that, coming up to, from a young boy to a 18. You wouldn't use it for someone older than that. Okay, so it's an affectionate term said by someone that's older, either a man or a woman, to a person to a male that's young, probably could be a boy up to about 18, but probably not older, because then it could be seen as disrespectful. Does that make sense, Jessica?
Yes.
It's something you could say to a young boy or a teenager, but not older than that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it's commonly used. It's common.
It's common. So
yeah, it's commonly used.
Okay. And I have another question for you.
Go on.
You're really not up to it, and if you can talk about the difference between these structures. They are to be up to and to be up for.
Yeah, because we spoke about this, didn't we?
Yeah, spoke about it. I think it's
Okay. All right. So the first one is the structure is to be up to it. To be up to it.
To it. Yeah.
If I'm not up to a task, in other words, if I am not up to it, a certain task, like let's say you said, a job, some kind of job that's beyond my skills. Okay. Let's say you said, there's a job that's advertised and it's for this, and this, maybe a translator or something. I would say I'm not up to it. In other words, I haven't really got the qualifications to do it.
You are not
got the skills to do it.
Okay.
So
you are not good enough.
If I said I'm really not up to it,
okay.
Or so it almost seems like too much for me to do personally. It should be someone else. But if I said I'm not up for it, it would probably mean I don't really want to do it. So there's a distinct difference there. Yeah. If I'm not up to it, it means I'm not capable. I'm not either I don't have the skills, or I'm not in the physical shape to do whatever's being asked for me to do. But if I'm not up for it, using for, it means I don't really want to do it. I would be quite happy this afternoon just to sit in and watch a film.
Okay. So it's connected if you want to do something or not when you use the for.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's a real nuance, isn't it? That
it is.
For, if you're up for something, it means that you want to do it. You're up for going out tonight. Mm-hmm. So someone could say, "You up for going out tonight?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm up for going out tonight. That's great." But if someone said, "Are you up to the task of climbing Mount Everest, for example, or running a marathon, for example?" At the moment, I'm not in the physical shape where I could do it, so I'm not up to it.
Oh, okay.
Not up to it at the moment. I might be up for it, like I might want to do it, but I'm not up to it. So they are really different. Even though there's only one different word there, to or for, they mean two very different things.
But for example, when you are not feeling good, can you say, I'm not up to it? It's the same.
You can, and what you're saying there, okay, if you invite me out for dinner, okay. Tonight, I could say to you, I would love to come, Jessica, but I'm not up to it. Okay. That would mean that I'm feeling a bit ill, or I'm not really feeling, maybe I've got a stomach ache or a headache or something. I could say I'm not up to it. Meaning I'm just, maybe we've just been speaking about the headache, the migraine that I've got. You think about all these things, when you hear them, when you see them, you must think, when do you use that and what does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's, in my opinion, it's good when you make some examples. So, for example, for not native speakers, it's useful because when you have to use this expression, the context. Well, that's good. That's very important.
I think it's useful. We both think it's useful. Other people do as well. But okay, are there any more questions, or is that the end of Jessica Games today? You have been listening to the English on Air podcast. We hope it was okay and you follow us. For lots of free English learning material, visit our website and visit us again. All the best.